The morning had started like any other on Emily Carter's small farm, the kind of quiet morning she had dreamed of during long, sleepless nights overseas. The sky was pale gold, the kind of light that made the dew on the grass shimmer. Her son Jake had already left for school on the old yellow bus, and her daughter Lily was inside, practicing piano. Out here, there was peace. The only sound was the clink of her hammer as she drove a new post into the dry ground, mending the section of fence a storm had torn down last week. Emily wore her usual uniform, faded jeans, worn boots, a plaid shirt rolled up at the sleeves. Her movements were steady, efficient. It was muscle memory, really, every swing, every lift, every adjustment. That same precision she used to survive, now redirected toward keeping her land alive. The farm wasn't much. 20 acres, 2 horses, a few goats, and a vegetable garden that helped feed the family through winter, but it was hers. And after everything she'd been through, hers meant something sacred. She wiped the sweat from her brow and leaned on the fence post, letting her eyes wander to the dusty road that wound down the hill. That road was usually empty, maybe a delivery truck once in a while, or the sheriff passing through. But today, the sound that reached her ears wasn't the hum of a car engine. It was deeper, rougher. A growl that multiplied, building into a roar. Her stomach tightened. Motorcycles. Several of them. Emily stood still, listening, gauging distance the way she used to gauge enemy movement through static-filled radios. They were coming fast. The dust cloud appeared first, a rolling brown haze, and then came the glint of chrome, the flash of leather jackets, and the flicker of sunlight off metal. 5 of them. Maybe 6. She rested her hammer against the fence and straightened up slowly, rolling her shoulders as if she were just another farmer stretching after a long morning's work. But her eyes had already changed, that calm, calculating look she hadn't worn since her military days. The first bike pulled into her driveway, its tires crunching against gravel. The rider killed the engine and swung off, his boots landing heavy. He was big, tall, wide shoulders under a black leather vest with a skull emblem on the back and iron serpents stitched above it. The others followed suit, spreading out casually, like wolves circling a clearing. "Morning," Emily said evenly, wiping her hands on her jeans. "Morning," the leader echoed, his tone dripping with mock politeness. He took off his sunglasses and looked around. "Nice little spread you got here." "Thanks." He smiled, the kind of smile meant to unsettle. Shame if something happened to it. Emily didn't flinch. That a threat, or just poor manners? One of the men snorted, amused. The leader stepped closer, his boots sinking slightly into the dirt. "Relax, sweetheart, we're just making introductions. See, my boys and we like to keep an eye on the area. Folks around here, they appreciate our protection." Protection. That word tasted familiar. She'd heard it in villages half a world away, from men just like these, always smiling before they bared their teeth. Emily tilted her head slightly. "And how much does this protection cost?" He grinned wider. "Depends on what you've got. Maybe we take a few dollars, maybe we take a little product from your garden. Maybe we just stop by from time to time to make sure no one causes trouble." "You mean you cause trouble," she said quietly. His grin faltered just a bit, like he hadn't expected her to say that. "Lady, I think you misunderstand." "I don't," she interrupted. "You should leave now." For a heartbeat, no one moved. The wind rustled the tall grass. A crow called somewhere out by the tree line. The leader's face darkened. "Or what?" he asked, his voice low, dangerous. Emily's gaze didn't waver. "Or you'll find out I'm not as polite as I look." The men laughed. Loud, cruel laughter that rolled across the fields. One of them kicked at the dirt, another spat near her boots. The leader leaned in close enough for her to smell the oil and sweat on his jacket. "You got guts," he said softly. "I'll give you that. We'll be back later, sweetheart. Maybe you'll be in a friendlier mood." Emily didn't answer. She just stood there, arms folded, watching as they climbed back onto their bikes and revved the engines. Gravel sprayed as they tore off down the road, leaving behind a cloud of dust and the faint, fading echo of laughter. When they were gone, Emily stayed still for a long moment. Her pulse was steady, but her mind was racing. She finally picked up the hammer again, finished pounding the fence post into place, and muttered to herself, "So that's how it's gonna be." She glanced toward the barn, where an old, locked trunk sat beneath the hayloft. It had been years since she'd opened it. Inside were the tools of a life she'd promised never to return to. But some promises were easier to break than others. Night fell quietly over the valley, the kind of deep, consuming darkness that only existed far from the city. The stars hung sharp above the rolling hills, and the air was heavy with the scent of hay and dust. Inside the farmhouse, Emily sat at the kitchen table, pretending to read while the old clock ticked too loudly on the wall. Her kids were asleep upstairs, Jake curled up with his baseball glove, Lily snuggled against her stuffed rabbit. That sound, that peace, was what she'd built her life around. But she could feel it slipping, the fragile shell of safety cracking. She'd seen their kind before, men who mistook kindness for weakness, who believed fear was the only language worth speaking. Emily had faced men far worse than them in places where the stakes were life or death. But this was different. This was home. She couldn't just disappear into another mission. She had to protect it, protect her children, without ever letting them see the storm she was about to unleash. When the clock struck 11, she moved quietly. She slid open the pantry door and reached for a small, weathered box hidden behind bags of flour. Inside lay a single key, rusted, old, but still solid. She took it to the barn, careful not to let the screen door slam behind her. The moonlight caught the edges of the building, painting the wood silver. She pushed the door open and stepped into the familiar scent of hay, leather, and oil. In the corner, beneath the loft, was the trunk. She knelt beside it, the key fitting easily into the lock. It clicked once, then opened. Inside lay a past she'd buried, her M24 rifle, carefully wrapped in cloth, a combat knife, a few clips of ammunition, and a small patch with the faded insignia of Delta Force. She ran her hand over the patch, remembering faces, voices, missions. People who hadn't come home. Emily checked the weapon, cleaned it, loaded it. Every movement was precise, deliberate. She hadn't forgotten a single detail. You didn't forget something like that. When she was done, she slipped on her old tactical jacket, a size looser now, but still fit for purpose, and climbed the ladder to the loft. From there, she could see the entire driveway, the road leading in, the barn entrance. It wasn't long before the rumble started again. Distant, faint at first, then louder, closer. 6 bikes this time. They came like thunder over the hills, engines roaring, lights cutting through the dark. Emily steadied her breathing. She didn't plan to kill anyone, not unless she had to, but she would make sure they never came back. The first headlight broke the darkness, sweeping across the field. Emily adjusted her rifle, took aim. One deep breath, a single squeeze, crack. The sound echoed off the hills. The headlight exploded in a shower of glass. The bike swerved, skidding sideways into the dirt. Cursing followed. Another beam of light flashed across the yard. She shifted her aim slightly and fired again. Crack. The front tire burst, sending another man tumbling into the grass. Shouting erupted now. Voices shouting, "Who the hell's shooting?" And, lights off, engines revved, boots hit the gravel. Emily smiled grimly. They were disorganized, panicking, exactly as she'd expected. She'd seen men with years of training crumble faster. She fired again, hitting the dirt a few feet from another man's boots. He yelped, dove behind his bike, and shouted something about retreating. They tried to regroup near the gate, hiding behind their motorcycles, scanning the darkness. One of them fired back, wild, reckless shots that hit nothing but fence posts. Emily waited, calm and silent. She could feel her heartbeat steady in her throat, her breath measured, her hands still as stone. She could have ended it there, but she wanted them to understand. Fear wasn't just a weapon, it was a message. So she shifted position, moving soundlessly along the loft, and dropped down behind the barn. In the darkness, she picked up an old metal bucket and hurled it toward the field. It clanged loudly, echoing across the open space. Instantly, 3 of the bikers fired toward the noise, giving away their positions. Emily slipped closer, crouched behind a stack of hay bales, and shouted, her voice sharp, commanding, "Drop your weapons and leave my land." They froze. Something in her tone, not just anger, but authority, hit them harder than the gunfire. The leader, the same man from that morning, finally spoke up, trying to sound confident. "Lady, you don't know who you're messing with." "Oh, I know exactly who I'm dealing with," she called back. "Question is, do you?" Another shot rang out, this one deliberate, close enough to his boot that he stumbled backward. The confidence drained from his face. He looked around, seeing only shadows, hearing only her voice. "Let's go," one of the others shouted. "She's crazy." They scrambled toward their bikes, engines coughing to life. Gravel spun as they tore down the road, headlights shattered, curses fading into the night. Emily watched until their tail lights disappeared completely. Then she exhaled slowly, lowering the rifle. The field was quiet again, except for the whisper of wind through the grass. She stepped out into the open, her silhouette outlined in the moonlight, scanning for any sign of return. Nothing. Only peace again. Emily turned back toward the barn, locked the trunk once more, and hid the key in its place. Inside the house, her children still slept soundly, unaware that their mother had just defended their world with the same precision she once used on distant battlefields. Before heading to bed, she looked out the kitchen window at the dark road and whispered to herself, "You picked the wrong farm." The sun rose over the valley like nothing had happened, soft gold spilling over the fields, painting the barn and the fence in light. A thin mist clung to the grass, and the air was cool, calm, deceptively peaceful. But Emily Carter knew better. She stood on her porch, coffee steaming in her hands, watching the sheriff's cruiser crawl up her driveway. The bikers were still there, lined up neatly against the old oak tree at the end of the field. Their wrists were zip-tied, their heads low, their faces pale. They looked smaller in the daylight, stripped of the darkness and noise that had once made them feel powerful. Most of them avoided her gaze, though a few shot nervous glances toward the barn, as if afraid she might still be up there, rifle in hand. Sheriff Tom Harlan stepped out of the car, adjusting his hat and whistling low when he saw the scene. "Well," he said, his voice slow and incredulous, "you've been busy." Emily took a sip of coffee. "They came back," she said simply. "Looks like they came to regret it," he muttered, walking closer to the men. He bent down, looked at their bruised faces, and shook his head. "You boys sure know how to pick the wrong woman to mess with." One of the bikers groaned. "She's insane. She ambushed us." Tom raised an eyebrow. "Ambushed you? On her own property?" He turned to Emily. "Want to tell me what happened?" Emily's tone was calm, steady, too steady for someone who'd just taken down 6 armed men. "They showed up last night. Started circling the property. I told them to leave. They didn't. That all." She gave a small shrug. "They changed their minds." Tom stared at her for a moment, then let out a low laugh. "You always had a way with words." He looked toward the barn, spotting a few stray shell casings glinting in the dirt. "You used that old rifle of yours. Just to make a point," she said. He nodded slowly, clearly deciding not to ask further. "You know, I could take these guys in for trespassing, intimidation, attempted arson, and maybe a few other things. But somehow, I get the feeling they've learned their lesson." The leader, still tied to the tree, shot Emily a look, not of defiance but of recognition. "Who the hell are you?" he asked, his voice hoarse. Emily looked at him for a long moment, then said quietly, "Someone you should have left alone." Tom chuckled under his breath. "That's one way to put it." He started calling for backup on his radio, and Emily walked down the porch steps toward the oak tree. The gravel crunched beneath her boots. The men flinched as she approached. She didn't raise her voice or posture, she didn't need to. Her presence alone was enough. She crouched in front of the leader and met his eyes. "You've got a lot of places you could be," she said. "So why here?" He hesitated, then muttered, "We heard this farm was easy pickings. Just some single mom and her kids." Emily's jaw tightened, but she kept her voice even. "Next time you hear that," she said, "remember how it turned out." The man looked away. She stood and walked back toward the porch, the sheriff's voice fading behind her as he read them their rights. The morning light felt heavier now, the adrenaline wearing off, the exhaustion sinking in. But she didn't regret a thing. When she stepped inside, the smell of toast filled the air. Lily was at the table, swinging her legs and eating breakfast, her hair still messy from sleep. Jake sat across from her, reading a comic book. They looked up when Emily entered. "Mom," Jake asked, "what's with all the police cars?" Emily poured herself another cup of coffee and smiled faintly. "Just chased off some pests, honey." "Like raccoons?" Lily asked. "Something like that." They accepted that answer easily, as children do. Emily sat down, watching them eat, her heart softening. The world outside could be cruel and ugly, but here, in this kitchen, there was light, laughter, and the sound of spoons clinking against bowls. That was what she fought for. Not revenge, not pride, just this. An hour later, the police trucks rumbled away, carrying the bikers with them. The dust settled once more over the road. Emily walked out to the field, picked up a broken piece of one of their bikes, and tossed it onto the scrap pile behind the barn. The horses grazed peacefully. Again, unbothered, she leaned against the fence and took a deep breath. The smell of wildflowers carried on the wind, mixing with the earthy scent of soil. Her muscles ached, but her mind was clear. For years, she had tried to bury the part of herself that had belonged to another world. The soldier, the sniper, the operator. She had thought that version of her was gone, replaced by the farmer, the mother, the quiet survivor. But last night reminded her that she could still be both. That she didn't need to choose between strength and peace. Somewhere down the road, an engine roared faintly, just a single motorcycle this time, passing by and fading into distance. She didn't even look up. Emily Carter finished her coffee, set the mug on the fence post, and smiled at the horizon. "Let them come," she whispered. "They'll learn." And with that, she turned back toward the farmhouse, the safe, simple life she'd fought so hard to keep, knowing that for the first time in years, she wasn't just surviving. She was home.